that. But harvest is, that's the big game. That's what we're all preparing for most of the year. Barrel orders, keeping things, like I said, it always comes back to cleaning, keeping things clean, going out in the vineyards, walking the vineyards, and then, that first day of harvest shows up and there's grapes on your crush pad and you got to be ready to go. And depending on the place you work and the fruit you're sourcing or what you have available to you at your estate, harvest can last anywhere from 2 to 3 months, and it can be grueling. It's 6-7 day work weeks. My wife calls herself a harvest widow. I'm always at the winery, and it can be tiring, but it's fun. How could you not love it? Living in the Napa Valley and being able to work with such amazing fruit and amazing people and farmers all the time. It's exhausting, and towards the end of October, you start to feel it a little bit, but that it comes to an end, right? And I had a huge upbringing in the football community. My family was big football people, so I played football my whole life, and football season was harvest season. So my whole life, fall has always been my busiest time of year, whether it was football or winemaking.
Yeah, welcome everybody back to the Barrels and Roots podcast. I am your host, Sean Trace, and I have an awesome guest with me today. Can you tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Ben Parodi. I'm the assistant winemaker at Vineyard 29. But I also have launched a couple of my own projects, and I'm just a kind of jack of all trades when it comes to the alcohol industry. Produced numerous different products and different styles of wine and different styles of alcoholic beverages, from beer, brandy, cider, just about everything you can think of. But I love winemaking, so I kind of just stick with that in me right now.
That's awesome, man. Well, how did you get started in winemaking? What was the catalyst that kicked off that path for you?
Yeah, so actually, my family has some pretty deep roots in the wine industry, specifically in the Napa Valley. In 1906, my great-grandfather decided to leave San Francisco, where he was living with his wife. After the earthquake, she said, "I don't want to live here anymore." And they bought a winery in St. Helena. It's actually right on the corner of Highway 29 and Charter Oak, and it's actually where Charter Oak Restaurant exists today. So yeah, my great-grandfather and my grandfather were winemakers, and unfortunately, they sold that winery back in 1970. So, and moved the family back to San Francisco. So that's where I grew up. And just having that in my background helped me. Hearing stories from my grandfather and all that stuff about, making wines in the 40s and 50s when he was a kid. I was just always interested in it. Then coming to wineries with my parents growing up, sitting in tastings, listening to people talk, it was just fascinating, and I loved it.
Yeah. I'm curious too, because, my question is like, as you're getting into winemaking, what are the steps that you took that kind of took you down that path to get there? Did you go study? Did you start doing internships? What was it that got you into winemaking?
It was all of that, actually. I graduated high school at 18, got an athletic scholarship to UC Davis, where I did track and field, shot put and hammer for 4 years and coached a little bit there. And after I decided a pro career in track and field wasn't going to work, I decided to use my viticulture and enology degree and move to Napa. And I started with just some easy internships, just working harvests, and then finding odd jobs to do outside of harvest to keep me busy and keep income, because rent here is not cheap for a 23-year-old. It's just starting out.
Right.
So that's kind of how all these other opportunities, cider and things like that, beer brewing, fell into my lap, because it's all different, but it's all the same, right? So, so I did a couple internships. I started out at Vititui Winery. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of that, in St. Helena. I worked there during harvest for 2 years, and took another internship at Vineyards in 2018, 2017. And then took another internship at Elise Winery in Yountville, where eventually they thought I was good enough to stay on and be hired as their cellar master.
That's awesome.
And so, yeah, it's just, getting out there, meeting people. And the degree absolutely helps, although it is not totally necessary. You start from the bottom, regardless of the degree or not. You're digging out tanks, pulling hoses, scrubbing barrels, and cleaning everything relentlessly. But you got to start somewhere, and it's fun to do that, because although you have the educational background, I understood it, and the theory was all there, but I had never actually put it into practice outside of messing around with my roommates and brewing 5-gallon batches of beer, or buying apple juice at the farmer's market and trying to ferment cider in my closet. That's other than that, there was no practical application. So the internships, spending 3 years as an intern is really just one way to really speed your way up to the top and kind of get a grasp on things that you've already learned, but now you can put into practice.
I'm sure, man. And that's like, certain things take time to learn. And I want to ask you this, because you've worked in wineries, cider production, and custom crush facilities, and now you make your own wine as well. Yeah. What have all those experiences taught you about what actually makes a great bottle?
It's funny because, obviously everybody always gives credit to winemakers. But it really starts, and you've probably heard several people in the industry say this, it really starts in the vineyard. The type of fruit you have, the location the fruit's coming from, and the soils, the weather, what they would call terroir, right? All of those make it into the bottle. And then as a winemaker, it's just knowing what to do with that. What's your style going to be? What's the varietal you're working with? Where is this fruit coming from? How do you want it to, taste? And my approach to winemaking is to be very hands off and try to let the vineyard speak for itself. And one of my favorite people and a huge mentor for me, Russell Bevan, used to say, "We're just caretakers of nature, and just got to let nature run its course." You don't want to intervene too much in the grapes. Let them speak for themselves. Obviously, there's some work we have to do and intervene sometimes, but if you're doing a good job, you're keeping things clean, you're not letting things go rogue on you, as sometimes we say, should be able to produce a pretty solid wine if you have a good foundation, which, like I said, starts in the vineyard.
That's so amazing. I want to ask you this one too, because for me, I'm fascinated by the whole process. But and I'm coming back this year for Harvest to film a documentary. Like, I'm coming back and I'm going to go to a bunch of wineries and film them in the fields that day and kind of capture what people go through. And Harvest sounds exciting, but also exhausting. What is it really like for someone who's never experienced it? Because I got to prep myself a little bit,
Yeah, I mean, Harvest is, it is intimidating sometimes. But from our perspective, it's the only time of year we get to make wine. So it's our Super Bowl, it's getting everything, totally perfect as you could possibly get it. And then the off season is just kind of fun stuff, blending, bottling, managing the finishings of fermentations, things like that. But Harvest is, that's the big game. That's what we're all preparing for most of the year. Barrel orders, keeping things, like I said, it always comes back to cleaning, keeping things clean, going out in the vineyards, walking the vineyards. And then, that first day of harvest shows up and there's grapes on your crush pad and you got to be ready to go.
Right.
And depending on the place you work and the fruit you're sourcing or what you have available to you at your estate, harvest can last anywhere from 2 to 3 months, and it can be grueling. It's 6-7 day work weeks. My wife calls herself a harvest widow. I'm always at the winery, and it can be tiring, but it's fun. How could you not love it? Living in the Napa Valley and being able to to work with such amazing fruit and amazing people and farmers all the time. It's exhausting, and towards the end of October, you start to feel it a little bit, but that it comes to an end, right? And I had a huge upbringing in the football community. My family was big football people, so I played football my whole life, and football season was harvest season. So my whole life, fall has always been my busiest time of year, whether it was football
Yeah.
or winemaking.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I mean, it's interesting too because it seems that there's a time where, it's like I make videos, right? And sometimes I'll go and
Mhm.
we'll be preparing to make a video or prep something for my wife. We'll be preparing to make a music video. But when you're there on stage, it's go time. And
It's
it
good time.
seems to me it's go time, and it seems to me like harvest is go time.
Yep.
It's time to like, all right, we've done all this stuff all summer. We've prepped everything we can prep. Now is the time. And it's like, it's wild too, because my friend's like, he's like, we're checking sugars. And, like right when that sugar hits the point that I want it, or right before it, because he wants to like have while he's picking, it's like, you know, coming into the range, he's like, then we go. And it's
Mhm.
all hands on deck. It's no one messing around, and you get it done. But I love that because I love the fact that like, you know, you don't know how much you can rise to the occasion until you rise to the occasion, And so I
Totally.
think that that's one of the things that's special to me and why I think I'm going to have more hard drive space because I think I'm going to be filming a whole bunch of stuff when I'm there for harvest. Uh, Go ahead, brother.
Oh, I was just gonna say you're gonna love it. I mean, there's nothing quite like
Yeah,
it, man.
I'm looking forward to it. Well, I want to ask you this. Most people
Mhm.
see wine on the shelf, but like what happens behind the scenes that would completely surprise them?
Um, you know, it's a funny question because it, I always think of it. It's kind of a hard question because most people grab a bottle of wine off the shelf and they're looking at the label, right? And the coolest
Mm-hmm.
label gets picked a lot of the times for I would say the amateur wine drinker, um, and they don't really know the work that goes into it, how hard it is, how grueling those days could be, and I think it would surprise most people to see harvest in action and to
Mm-hmm.
see 4 or 5 guys running on very little sleep trying to make all this stuff happen to produce the best possible bottle of wine they can. And, it, it's, I feel like that's something that is lost on a lot of people. And unless you're constantly visiting wineries during that time of year, it's probably something you've never seen before. Rolling barrels
Yeah.
out, filling barrels, and just seeing that much tonnage and processing it.
I growing up in St. Helena, um, I remember after harvest the smells, the
Hmm.
crush, and like where the whole people don't realize the whole valley smells like wine, like
Hmm.
not minorly, like it's massively. Like I'm sitting there and everything around me just is so beautifully um, filled with this smell. And
Hmm.
it's an experience that you can't know unless you've been there. And like even the wild part is I open I have wines from around the world that I drink, like especially because now I live in Asia part time. And the wines
Hmm.
we get from here are from a lot from South America, a lot from Australia, a lot from Australia. And yet, when I opened a Napa cab the other week, and that smell popped out, I was like, it just like this sensory memory was like home. It was just like
Yeah,
it was
awesome.
100% took me home. I was just like, that's home, man. And I've never had that with another wine, but with that wine, I 100% did.
Yeah, I mean, it's nostalgia is a huge thing, right?
Yeah,
Like
right?
the smells tend to trigger nostalgia more than any other sense, right?
Mhm. I love that, man. Well, I wanna ask you this next question. Um,
Hmm.
You've led teams through harvest and cellar work. What
Mhm.
makes someone great in the winery, even if they don't know much about wine yet?
Well, you don't, like I said, you don't really need to know too much. You just have to be coachable. You have to be able to listen, um, and apply what I'm trying to explain to you. Um, and the learning comes with that, right? But all in all, you just need to have a hell of a work ethic to do this kind of work, and you have to have a passion for it, and you have to love it because it is hard. It's not sitting at home behind a desk or sitting in an office behind a desk. It's grueling and it's tough work. So you got to really love it.
Hmm.
And then on top of all that, the work ethic and loving it, you got to be clean. You got to be a very clean person, almost to a level of OCD. And some of the best
Yeah.
winemakers I've worked with truly are OCD.
I
So,
think, you know what? And I know people are like, what? I work in video production. And honestly, I
mhm,
love barrels and roots so much that at some point in time, I'm looking at the Davis winemaking certificate, and I know that doesn't make me a winemaker, but I want to learn, and I would love to come and make wine someday.
mhm.
And people go, "Oh, dude, it's a lot of scrubbing barrels." I'm like, dude, I love scrubbing shit. I love keeping things clean. I am so OCD. Like, if you were to see my room, it's like you'd be like, "Wow, this guy's got problems," and I do, and it's wonderful. But it makes it's helped me make my videos so good because
Yeah,
when you have someone's like, well, why would you trim that music out here instead of here? I said, because it makes it perfect, because it makes it work.
mhm,
Like if I have it like quarter of a second further, it doesn't sound right. You got to pull it right back. And some people don't understand that level of OCD. But for me,
yeah,
when I want something to be absolutely amazing, that's what you got to do.
yeah. I mean, you're halfway there then.
That's awesome. Well, I want to ask you this, if you were to pour a glass of wine for yourself, what would you be pouring for yourself?
So typically, if I'm coming home after a long day of work or something, I typically don't drink a lot of red wine. Tends to
Mm,
be mostly white wines. So like a Sauvignon Blanc or a Chenin Blanc, something nice, light, crisp. Um, I taste enough wines throughout the day, especially red
yeah.
wines. I've worked in mostly red wine houses. So if I'm
Mm.
blending or tasting something, it's mostly red wine. So the last thing I want when I come home is a glass of red wine. So like I said, yeah, something nice, light. I love a Riesling, Chenin Blanc, Sauvignon Blanc. Yeah.
That's awesome. I like
It's the
I
only
like that,
wine I
man.
can't keep in my house. It's just always gone.
It's gone, right? I have
Yep.
people that will occasionally send bottles over to my house in California, and my address is with my mom's house because we split time. When we come back, we'll stay with my mom.
Sure.
And my mom's like, "Hey, please stop sending wine here." And I said, "Why?" She's like, "I'm drinking it all." And I was like, "Well, it happens. It happens." Like she's like, "No, I'm drinking all of it. Anything people send." And I was just like, "Okay, how many bottles have you had?" She's like, "Too many." And I was just like, "Okay." And all these people are messaging me, "Hey, did you get the bottle I sent to your house?" I was like, "You sent a bottle to my house?" And I'm like, "Hey, mom, can you talk to me about this?" And she's like, "Yeah, it came. It was delicious." So I think I
I
should
love
just
that.
turn my mom into like a wine critic online and just have her review everything that people send to my house because she's drinking more than I am right now.
There's people with less qualification out there doing that already, man. So
Oh, dude, I think I'm going to turn that into a segment now when I go back to California this summer. I'm just going to take all of the wines that people have sent over that are still at our house, bust open those bottles, and just call it Carolyn Reviews.
that's a great
And get your
idea.
or grandma reviews wine. Let's hear let's hear grandma's thoughts on these wines. Like I think it didn't get me messed up enough. Okay, grandma. Whoa. Okay. Oh,
Yeah,
you
it's
know.
what does this taste like? A good buzz.
Yeah. God, man, that's awesome. Okay, yeah, you inspired me. I know what I'm doing now. You've worked with both grapes and apples for cider. What do
Yeah.
these two worlds teach you differently? And are they very similar? Or is this like totally like I was gonna say apples and oranges, but like, geez, that I didn't mean for that pun to come out this early in the day.
Yeah.
Are they similar, or is it just apples and grapes?
So yeah, I mean they're not. They're obviously different. They have their differences, but The way I approached it is, I was looking for a job, like I said, an odd job after my internships. And I was approached by a gentleman who asked if I knew how to do it. And I said, I can make you alcohol out of just about anything, man. So just give me a chance. So we launched this cider company together. And the one thing I knew how to do was make really good white wine at the time. So, I talked to some people and did some research on my own. And I just thought, I'm in Napa Valley. I have winemaking equipment. It sounds like I just need to treat it like a white wine, white wine production just in general. And that also led me and the business partner I was working with to come up with the idea of blending in finished wine into our cider. So we had two different SKUs. We had a rosé that we used Pinot Noir, finished Pinot Noir, that we blended in. And then we had a white cider that we blended in Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc, kind of whatever I could get my hands on the bulk market at the time. And both turned out great.
Sounds awesome.
They were great. Unfortunately, we just couldn't continue selling it. At the time when we started it, cider was a big booming, starting to come up industry. And then with the launch of like all the seltzers and White Claws, everybody kind of moved away from cider and moved into that. So it was just a hard project to keep going and keep alive. But like I said, it was something I needed to do to kind of hopefully make some extra income at the time. And it taught me a huge amount. It's they're not the same. There's different enzymes sometimes you have to use. But as far as milling and processing apples, we never actually did that. I would purchase already made bulk juice from the Sierra foothills and bring it here just to make it easier, because we were producing at a winery while I was working a full-time job at a winery. So it was, wine work's done for the day. Time to work on the cider.
That's awesome. I'm interested too, because like one of the things that's fascinating for me is that, as working in this field, there's so much to do. And like one of the things that you said, you can ferment anything. And humans have been doing this for a long time, and they have fermented anything, like anything, that you could imagine. But one of the things that I'm fascinated by is that, we have been doing this for so long, and there's such a tradition to it. And it's interesting to like talk about fermenting anything, because my wife, there's a thing in Vietnam, like when a woman is has a baby, there's all these, these processes that are natural home remedies of sorts, traditional things that help them recover. And one of the things that they do is they get this black rice. It's literally black. It's this dark black rice. It tastes delicious, very sugary, very like sweet. And then they leave it, and they put it into this container, add some water, and it ferments. And it becomes, I don't know how they do it, but my God, it is hands down one of the most delicious things I've ever had. It's sweet, it's alcoholic, and it, like, supposedly for a woman, according to like East Asian medicine, helps restore blood after they've, had childbirth. And whether it does that or not, it's one of the most amazing things. And I was just like, I had like 2 spoons of it, and I was like, my wife's like, try this. And I was like, this is ridiculously amazing. And it was like, wow, I'm feeling like some rice right now. But like it was essentially, it was rice with rice wine that, was naturally starting to happen. But it was like, it's right. I was like, dude, I should start selling this in a restaurant in Napa or something. It was pretty amazing, But I want to ask you another question too, because my brain's super all over the place at all times. But
no worries.
For you, as you make wine, what are some of the things that inspire you in the process? Like what is it that kind of, makes you, is your inspiration or makes your clock tick as you're going in there to do all this?
Yeah. That's another really good question. I just really love applying. I've always been a really, really good chemistry student, and I just loved chemistry. So I always loved, thinking about the chemical process of fermentation. Obviously, There's a lot of biology involved, but the chemical process is what fascinated me. So, I like being in my lab and, testing different numbers that help me kind of see the broader picture of a wine
Mhm.
as it's developing. It helps make those winemaking decisions. But as far as inspiration goes, it's just something I love to do. I just like making wine. I like drinking wine, and I love sharing stuff that I've made with friends, family. So I think that's mostly it. It's that finished product when it's finally in the bottle. You know, 18, 24 months of hard work keeping that thing alive and keeping it
Yeah.
tasting good, and always monitoring it, watching it. When it's finally in the bottle and you can take it home and put it on a dinner table, with 4 or 5 guests. I mean, it's a lot of fun to be able to do that and say, "Hey, I did this." You know?
It's amazing to be able to take something out and say, "I made this."
Yeah.
I feel I love film photography, and
Mhm.
I take pictures in film still, and some people don't understand it. To me, it's a core love of mine that I get to go out there and create something. It is very much very visceral. I go in, I take a picture. I just took some pictures of my wife and daughter, and then for a week and a half, I didn't know whether they were good or not. And it always reminds me of the people in winemaking that you're there waiting for this barrel to kind of be ready,
Yep.
and I know that you guys are very actively doing stuff, but like, talk to me about that process. What goes in when things go in the barrel? What starts happening at that time?
Yeah. So, typically it's brought in right during harvest and it's fermented. And at Vineyard 29, we have 3 different styles of fermenters. We have stainless steel fermenters, which most everyone has seen those. We also have upright oak fermenters. So a lot of our
Oh,
estate
wow.
fruit we ferment in there. And then we also have concrete fermenters. So
Mm,
those they're fermented in one of those 3 styles of fermenters and pressed off to barrel, hopefully pressed off close to dryness, and they'll finish their primary fermentation in barrel, which is something I check weekly during harvest and after harvest until those wines have finished and gone completely dry. And then there's the secondary fermentation that occurs in barrel, and that's the malolactic fermentation. If you choose to put your wine through a malolactic fermentation, that's the one that kind of rounds the rugged edges that occur, um, that people seem to taste during the fermentation process. When the wine has gone totally dry, it's not totally palatable yet. It obviously needs time and barrel, and it needs to absorb some of those flavors that come from the barrel. But the softness comes from the malolactic fermentation. You've tasted a wine, you're like, oh, that's really smooth, right?
mhm.
Um, and that's just the a bacteria that takes the malic acid that's present in the wine and turns it into lactic acid. Um, it produces something called diacetyl, is one of the byproducts, and it's a buttery flavor. That's why
I
sometimes
lost
you
you
hear
there,
people
Ben.
refer to Chardonnay as very buttery. That's due to the malolactic fermentation.
After all the vineyards, harvests, and fermentations and bottles you've worked on, what still excites you about making wine?
Oh, I mean, it's obviously harvest time. I love seeing a new vintage hit the crush pad, because you're watching these vines very closely um, during the grow season, and every vintage is completely different, and the grow season is completely different, and so you're watching it for
Mm,
over this 5-6 month span, and while that's happening, you're going to have different patterns developing, and it completely changes the profile of the fruit. Now the site typically dictates that. But, for example, like a harvest like 2023, it was a much cooler harvest. We didn't have much of a summer, so it didn't get too hot. So we were able to stay very patient with our pit calls and let things
mm.
truly develop and take time on the vine. Whereas a harvest such as 2022, just the year before that, we had a week straight of about 110 plus degree heat right in the first week of September. So um, that obviously changes your picking decisions and flavor profiles as well. You know, you might have in a 2022, you might have a more riper flavor profile, whereas a 23 might be a little bit more um, calmer and more um, easier to palate.
That's awesome, man. Well, where can people
Mhm.
go to learn more about you and what you do with your winemaking?
So right now, I'm not producing my label, just taking some time to focus on working at Vineyard 29. But if they want to learn more about me and more about the wine I make, Vineyard 29 in St. Helena is an absolutely incredible facility, winery. Keith Emerson, who's the CEO and director of winemaking, is a fantastic winemaker, one of the best in the Napa Valley, and a lot of people would agree with that. Um, and yeah, I work on all those wines there tirelessly. So if they want to try something that I've produced, that's the place to go.